to do for the Victoria sandwich is to prepare the cake tins. I'm going to take a piece of kitchen paper and some softened butter, and then I'm going to rub that butter around the inside of the tin, covering the base and the sides of the tin. I find it's better to grease the tins with butter because it washes off easily. I find if I grease them with oil, it tends to leave a residue on the tins. And even though these tins claim to be non-stick tins, I find it still better to grease the tins. So I'm doing the same with the second tin. And to help make sure the cakes come out, I'm going to put a disc of baking parchment into the bottom of each tin. So I've cut this so it's slightly smaller than the base of the tin, so I don't get it coming up the edges at all. It fits within the base. So pop the other one in as well. Then I'm going to flour the tins, to flour the sides of them, because that helps it to come out. So I can put a little bit of flour in and then tap the tin so it coats the sides. Then goes all to the base, and then tip it into the other tin. So that's my first tin prepared. So the second tin, I'm going to do this over a plate. Tap it so I don't have any lumps of it on the sides, and tip out the excess. Then what I've got left on the plate I can put with the flour that I'm going to weigh to make the cake, so it's not wasted. I'm going to start by creaming together the butter and sugar for the cake. So I've got here a 250 gram block of butter. So because that's the weight of butter I need for the recipe, I'm not actually going to weigh it. I'm sure the scales of the company who pack the butter, their scales are probably more accurate than mine are. So that's all the butter. And then 250 grams of caster sugar. Then I'm going to add a pinch of salt and a few drops of vanilla extract. And it's pure vanilla extract rather than vanilla essence, because I think the extract has the nicest flavour. So I'm going to whisk this together. So I'm going to whisk this together. And what's happening is it's called creaming, and the fat is coating the sugar, and it will help to incorporate air into the mixture. And although it's got self-raising flour in the cake, which works as a raising agent, this creaming also helps incorporate air to give a little bit of extra rise to it. Okay, so it's ready when it's gone very pale in colour and it looks light and fluffy. So I'm going to scrape that down the sides of the bowl. Okay, now what I need to do now is to add some egg to that. So I've got 4 eggs, and rather than cracking them straight into there one at a time, I'm going to crack them into a bowl, because that way if the egg should happen to be off, then it won't contaminate all of the butter and sugar. I could do them 1 egg at a time and add it, but I'll actually crack all 4 eggs into my bowl. Thought that was a little bit of shell, but it's not. If you can see any shell at this stage, you can take it out. And the best way to take it out is actually to use a bit of the eggshell, because it attracts any shell to it, and then it's easy to get out of the mixture. So that's 4 eggs in the bowl, and I'm going to lightly beat them. You can use a whisk or you can use a fork. So I don't need the whisk anymore. That to one side, and I'm going to add about 1/4 of the egg and a spoonful of my flour. This is 250 grams of self-raising flour, and then I'm going to whisk this together. I think it's about time I have to get myself a new whisk soon, because this one isn't sounding very good. So once I've beaten that in, I'm going to add about another egg's worth, so about 1/3 of what's left, and a spoonful of flour. So why I'm adding the flour is to help stop it curdling. If I just add the egg and whisk it in, sometimes the mixture curdles, but just that small addition of flour helps to prevent it from curdling. I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl again. And this time I'm going to add half of the egg that's left. And another spoonful of flour, and whisk that all together. And then finally the rest of the egg and another spoonful of flour. Poor whisk, it might have to be retired, I think, after this video. So I'm going to stir that in to make sure it's mixed well, and then I'm going to sift the rest of the flour over the top. And then I'm going to fold this in. So nice big movements around the edge of the bowl and up through the middle. So it's to mix it in, but without knocking out too much of the air that you've whisked into it. So you need to do this with a spoon that's got a nice sharp edge to it. So like a big metal mixing spoon, or what I'm using is, it's like a cross between a spoon and a spatula, but it's got a nice thin edge that it will fold things in. You don't want to use a wooden spoon or an ordinary thick mixing spoon. Then once it's it's all folded through and the mixture looks nice and smooth, you need to divide it between the two prepared tins. Now, if you're being really fussy, you can actually weigh the amount of mixture that you put into both tins to make sure both have exactly the same amount of mixture. But otherwise you can do it by eye and try and divide it equally. And once it's in the tins, you can spread it out with either a palette knife, or you could use the back of a spoon if you wanted to. I find it's easier with a palette knife. There you are. It doesn't have to be perfect, because when you put it in the oven it will melt and it will level itself a little bit then anyway. Just roughly spread it out. Now the oven needs to be preheated. If you're using a fan oven, it should be at about 170, or a conventional electric oven at 190, or gas mark 5. So I'm going to put these cakes into the centre of the oven. And I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. They normally take somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. So always put the timer on for the shortest time, because it's better, you can always give them more time. But if they've got too brown, there's not much you can do about it. So I'm going to clear up while they're baking. The timer's gone off, so I'm going to have a look at these. So to test whether it's done, I'm going to press the top of it. It looks a nice even colour, a golden colour, and when I press the top it springs back, so I know that's ready. So I'm going to take that and leave it on the wire rack, and take the other one out as well. So I'm putting them on the wire rack so the air can circulate around them so they start to cool. And I need them to cool in the tins for about 5 to 10 minutes so the cakes firm up a little bit before I turn them out. So the cakes have been left to cool for 5 to 10 minutes, so I'm now going to take them out of the tins so they can cool completely. And these are loose bottom tins that I've got. So what I'm going to do is rest it on a can, and then I can take the tin down. Now, rather than just flipping it onto this so the top goes onto the rack, that would leave an impression on the top with the whatever the rack is, whether it's lines or a grid. So I'm going to leave it like that. Never turn the cake out onto the rack, as I say, because otherwise you'll get the impression. What we can do is use a palette knife to slide it off the metal base so that it will cool quicker. So it'll come away quite easily because it's on the paper, and when it's completely cold I can then take away the paper. So I'm going to use a can again for this cake. Put the cake on top and on the sides, then put it onto the rack, and then use the palette knife to slide it off. So I'm going to leave those now to cool completely. When you're assembling the cake, you can either use just jam or you can whip some cream and put it with the jam. This one I'm just going to use jam. Normally I use strawberry or raspberry jam, but I actually had this black cherry one in my cupboard and I thought that would be rather nice in it as something different. So to assemble the cake, I'm taking one layer, peel the paper away, and put it upside down on a cake board or a plate. I find it's easiest to have a flat plate for when it comes to cutting it. Then Take some jam out and then spread that out almost to the edges. I like quite a nice thick layer of jam in this. So that's the jam. If I were doing cream, what I would do is I would turn this cake over and spread cream on it and then put it on top. So this one, because there's no cream, I'm just putting straight on top as it is. Now for a Victoria sandwich, the classic way to finish it is to sprinkle over a little caster sugar. You often see recipes that say icing sugar, and you can do that if you wanted to. You could put a doily on top of the cake and then dust it with icing sugar, so when you lift the doily away it has a pattern on it. But I'm going to do it the classic way with just a little bit of caster sugar. And that's my Victoria sandwich, all ready to serve with a cup of tea.